Welcome to The Accidental Trainer, a podcast where you'll hear firsthand stories and tips on how to start and grow your training career.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of ATD Accidental Trainer Podcast. I'm your host, Alexandria Clapp, and today we have with us Danielle Wallace. Danielle is the Chief Learning Strategist of Beyond the Sky. Hi, Danielle.
It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Yay, I'm so happy to chat with you. I always love talking with you, Danielle. And I think we could probably talk about 10 different specific things on this podcast, but I reached out to you because I'm confused about learner personas. And I know that you are the person to help fill in my gaps and help me understand them. So I'm really excited to talk with you about that today. But before we do, let's talk a little bit about how you got to where you are today in your role.
Awesome. So before we get into the learner personas, which is a topic that I love, some insights maybe would ground you into why I love that topic. So I actually started my career at Procter & Gamble and then PepsiCo, where I was in marketing. And there we actually use learner personas a lot. That's where learner personas originated from, was the marketing realm. And this is not a new concept. At P&G and such, I thought that the higher up I could get in the organization, the more I could train people. Off the side of my desk, I was part of the training program. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic there at those organizations. But I thought maybe I could train more people if I just got higher up. But the reality is, as for many people in business, is you just get more profit and loss pressure. And what I really love doing, learning, training, helping others, I couldn't do. So I switched and left the marketing career and just pursued this passion of mine full time, which I'm privileged to do with Beyond the Sky Custom Learning, where we work with global and local clients. And now I get to do the stuff that I love, learning and development, but I can borrow in and bring in all those techniques and all those concepts from marketing that help make learning stick.
Okay. And learner personas is one of those techniques from marketing I know that we'll dig into. What else is, I'm just curious, are there other things that people don't realize that have come from the marketing world?
There's so much, whether it is this idea of, from a tech standpoint, like what we've seen with AR, VR, even AI and other lookalikes. This has been in the realm of marketing for a while. So there's so many technologies that we can borrow, and then so many concepts, whether it's even blended learning. If you go back now 20 years into the marketing world, where we as marketers were already using various omni-channels. So there's so much that we can apply. But what I love, Alexandria, is that we can take what works. It's because a lot of things in marketing don't work, but tested ideas that are proven, like learner personas, are actually things that we can grab hold of and implement, because all those bugs and flaws are already taken away.
Okay, so let's just jump into this learner personas conversation for anyone who is listening, who is asking themselves, what are learner personas? Can you help start at the beginning for us?
Yeah, so a learner persona is a fictional archetype of your learner. So I emphasize it's fictional. This person does not really exist. And I emphasize that it's an archetype because you're constructing it based on data to help make an informed decision. So it's like your audience analysis that we should do in learning and development as table stakes. What we're doing is we're super amping it, and we're taking even more data and even more insights, and we're putting that into a story of a person so we can make better decisions. That's ultimately what it comes to.
Okay. I want to dig in with more questions. I'm already going off my script of the questions I created before, just based on what you said. So, okay, if it's based on data and if it's similar to like your audience analysis, what kind of data should you be using? What kind of audience analysis? Like if someone is like, okay, I want to do this. Yes, this makes so much sense, but I'm not doing this already. how would they do that? What data should they be doing? Because I think there's probably some that doesn't matter and some that actually would be very helpful.
Yeah. So the keys I always try to stress is gather both qualitative data, so things you would see, hear, and quantitative data, which are typically more numerical based. And the reason why I say that as a starting point broadly is it helps you form a bigger picture of what you're looking at. But ultimately, the whole goal is to be able to put together a profile of a learner so you can understand their needs, their motivations, their characteristics. Hey, it may give you insight into where they'll be receptive physically to be taking training. Maybe they don't even want training. Maybe it gives you insights into what are better methodologies and approaches. We've used this so many times to, again, help make those informed decisions because they're based on data. So the real secret from the marketing world, which is very forgotten, is that marketing done well is all data. Like, it is all data. The executions, the ads, that's just the executions. What underlies it all, what makes it work, is data. It's the same thing with learner personas. You have to gather data to gain an understanding of what are the dislikes, what are the motivations, how many people are there. Some demographic data is typical. All of these together, this quantitative and qualitative, helps you, all this data, it all helps you form the picture. Okay, so this is who I'm targeting. Now I can make a more informed decision.
Can we walk through an example of your making I don't know where to start. Is that we think that we need training, how do you start and know that you need to do a learner persona?
Yeah, so learner personas can take a bit of time based on how much data you have access to. And data, again, could be in the form of information you have already, demographics, statistics, items from your LMS or from your HR information systems. So there is data there already. But again, it can be based on how much you may have or don't have. So I would always start off thinking about who is my audience that I'm going to actually be creating a lot of learning solutions for, so it's worth your time. Give you an example from an organization we work with, and our learner persona is named Mary. There's a few learner personas, but Mary is so important because she forms a bulk of our learning solutions, and she has very specific needs that dramatically shape the direction of our learning programs. So we used demographic data from Mary. She is a volunteer worker at a humanitarian organization, and we're fortunate to have some data that help illustrate not just the demographics. Demographic data is things that many of us can obtain or observe, but we also are fortunate to have data that capture some of her motivations. 80% indexing that she wants to make a contribution to her community. We also have seen through not just those quantitative pieces of information that she's 70, that she is retired, that she has a college education. So those demographic items. We can also see through qualitative means. In this case, we did a series of observations, like just observing Mary, this fictitious character, observing these various individuals and seeing, okay, so what might their day look like? What actually do you think motivates her? What are the constraints that we see as she's going about her workday? And we uncovered through that process that, yes, she is motivated to be able to work, to contribute in this volunteer capacity, like the data says. But we also inferred through the qualitative analysis that she wants the social interactions at work. Like, that's really important, that she is expecting training. Furthermore, because she was at the more of the peak of her career in the turn of the 2000s, she's expecting classroom training. She is using technology, which we saw through focus groups, but she's expecting the same level of training support she received back when she was working, which is everybody sitting in a classroom learning to use a computer together. I stress that as one aspect of it because that came through a lot in the solutions that we ended needing to do, really taking into account some of Mary's needs.
Okay. I have so many questions. So they're flying all around. One is as you were describing Mary and the data that you've been able to collect, it made me curious. Do you take maybe a real learner, their data, and anonymize it? Or do you take bits and pieces of data that you have to make this fictitious character? And well, let me just start there.
Alexandria, that's a perfect question and a very important one, I would say. So no, we do not take data from one person and then anonymize it. The whole point, instead of a learner persona, is that it's a more fun, interesting way to bring to life all the data. So it's actually really critical to capture a lot of data. Hence the quantitative data from survey. Generally, there's enough people that have submitted something or doing observations, or not just one person, maybe a few people, to get ideally focus groups to get a better insight into how that persona is. So such a key important information, because ultimately we need the persona to be an archetype, representative, yet still accurate.
What's the difference between learner personas and empathy mapping? Or is there a difference?
That's a great question. They can achieve the same idea. So empathy mapping is a way to map out, for example, what your learner thinks and feels, what they hear, what they see, what they say do, maybe their pains and their gains. A learner persona those are great inputs actually into a learner persona, is to be able to gather that. The difference with a learner persona is we're taking all that data, which often again is quantitative and qualitative, and then we're putting that into a fictitious character, may I say, and bringing that persona to life through a character. So my example of Mary, so yes, we did gain a good insight into what Mary was thinking and feeling, what Mary was seeing in her environment and social media and magazines. What we were able to do is bring Mary to life. So when we make decisions at every turn, we actually ask each other, okay, what would Mary think of this? Would Mary understand the jargon? Would Mary even attend the training that we're proposing? Would Mary get it? So at every turn, it becomes the yardstick that we end up making decisions based on.
Okay, so I want to keep building on my question. So let's say that you're creating training and you have different types of trainings that you're doing, different types of content, and you have different types of workers. So you have folks who are frontline, deskless, and then you have folks who are doing more cognitive related tasks that are behind a computer. I imagine I wouldn't just create this one persona that's my frontline worker, Bob, and one person who's my desk worker, Joe, or whatever. Right? You probably need multiple personas, or what's right here?
Yeah. So what typically actually people ask is, people say, "Oh my gosh, I've talked with the business. We've got 20 different roles in our frontline office. So maybe there's only 60 people. We have 20 roles. I think I should do 20 personas because each one's unique for each role." Oh my God. Oh my gosh, I'm not sure how one could actually do that and have it be useful. So yes, well, that would be utopia. In real life, we have to prioritize. So in the example that you gave, those are very distinct groups, and provided that both of them are of sufficient number, sufficient importance, then yes, you would make personas on each of them. But what I would caution actually is too many, because for those who are starting off creating learner personas, it becomes unwieldy and too daunting to create the 20 personas that capture all the roles. In our example with Mary, we do have Isabel and Mary, very distinct profiles, different pay structure, being paid, unpaid, different experience, different life stage, very different. So we have a few. But it's also interesting for us to make the decision to create the personas that we do. And secondly, to decide based on the project which persona has more importance. So the whole point of personas then is actually using them. So when we are creating new systems technology rollout, yes, it was for the whole organization. So we had a number of personas there at play. What became very evident was our persona Mary had more importance from a training change standpoint because of their vocalness, because of their numbers, because that this was a very key group that needed to ensure had their needs met. So as a result, we ended up creating learning solutions that really tailored around Mary's needs and really gave Mary the support. And the only reason why we could do that is because, yes, we had different personas, but they were of sufficient mass. There was enough people in the Mary persona versus the Isabel persona. So we were able to do so without having too many segments that are too small.
You talk a little bit about the impact that it was able to have. And part of that is being able to have less personas, not getting bogged down with creating 20,000 different personas for every single learner, potential employee that you have. What other common mistakes happen or things that can prevent you from kind of taking advantage of learner personas the way you should be?
Yeah, so typically what happens is twofold. One is not getting enough data, and the second one is making up data. Both have a place, to be honest. Both have a place. There's no right or wrong through that. So in the first piece, many organizations say, hey, I don't have any data. They won't give me anything from the learning management system. Yeah, I don't know what to do. I can't do a Lunar persona. I don't have demographic data. I don't have a survey from the organization. I can't do it. In contrast, we've created personas with other organizations, again, without those criteria. And there's so much that you can do as an individual by observing. So the qualitative data that I spoke to, we went into the work environment. We saw how people interacted, the fact that they didn't interact, actually. We saw that they weren't making conversations. We saw that they were emailing each other instead of walking to the person beside them. So much rich interactions and insights we were able to gather qualitatively, and that's just from observing. If you have support, then comes into the means of doing some type of survey or focus groups. So simple survey that you, as a learning professional, can instigate. So forget on a bigger issue. If you have support, gaining some insights, gaining some ideas as to, okay, how long are people's commutes, if that's a thing a factor? Where are people taking the training, if that's a thing a factor? What is their internet connection like, if that's a thing a factor? Again, thinking about your own organization's needs, think about the data that you would use to be helpful. I actually have a full learner persona template on my website, beyondthesky.ca, that has a template you can fill in so you can think about these types of questions you may want to ask. And even just asking those yourself sometimes can be helpful to start to fill in, based on what I'm observing, what I see in the parking lot, I can see that 80% of the workforce is driving in and they arrive by 9 a.m. There's lots that you can observe as well.
Okay, I want to go back to the focus groups that you mentioned, because I was trying to figure out where this plays in. Like, is that, and even as you were describing it, I started talking to myself in my head, and I know I might have missed your explanation of it. So you may have to repeat yourself. Is it that the focus groups helps give you data or to help inform the learner persona that you're creating? Or is it vice versa? The learner persona, you have it, and then you're able to use some of that to create a focus group. I guess in my head, I'm thinking focus group. I want to tap a couple people who I know are going to take this training and then ask them those questions, or have them run through, test something out, make sure that this is going to be successful for the big group when it actually rolls out.
So it comes down to the first phase. So right now we're speaking purely of the data gathering part. Okay. What I will speak to in a little bit is how to use a persona. So in the data gathering part, the focus groups become really fantastic tools to gain insights, to ask people, how is your commute in? Where, what are your career aspirations? Again, I'm thinking about things that are on the learner persona template that help you understand the persons as individuals. These are the means that you're gaining data. It's purely a data gathering exercise, the personas. The focus groups are a rich way to gain more insights. You could also achieve the same through one-on-one interviews. You could achieve the same through speaking with people's managers. Again, if you don't have access to the learner population, sometimes you can get it from facilitators. That's how you piece together these bits and pieces of data that we don't have access to. You're able to gain them all together, put them into some type of list that then you can create a persona from.
Okay, so clearly I'm getting excited about the how to use them part. But before we transition to that, is there anything else in this data gathering piece that we haven't addressed that would be helpful, or we'd be remiss if we didn't mention it?
Besides having the mix of quantitative and qualitative data, I would say it's important to be thinking holistically enough and not just getting pigeonholed into your immediate business needs. Say, I need to create a compliance course, and asking people what they feel about compliance. Well, I mean, hopefully your personas will live beyond this particular compliance course. So you think rich enough from the start, your persona has longevity, which it should. You do need to be creating your personas for your benefit of a longer term use.
That makes sense too, because you're creating trainings for someone who's not just going to do a one and done compliance training. They're going to have hopefully like professional development throughout their career in your organization, if you're within an organization. Okay, so now let's talk about how do you use them? How does that work?
So the fun part comes in actually using this data and putting them together through this fictitious archetype. We typically do that within a team meeting. We will collectively come up with a name for the persona, giving them a character, giving them a life. I think of Isabel. I think of her life. We create photos from it. In the past, we've had a mannequin that we've dressed up to exemplify the persona, images of their lifestyles. And at that point, we also start to piece in some of the bits of information. So Isabel, she lives in Montreal. She walks to work. There's bits of information we piece together. And this becomes important because I mentioned two things with data, not having enough, and the second is making it up. The second part of making it up is done carefully. So while we don't want to make up data per se, we do need to infer information in order to help build richness to the persona. So yes, I made up that Isabel lives in Montreal because it's a fictitious character. But I that was very deliberately chosen, chose that as an area. But no, I made it up. Of course I did. And also filling in the different gaps on things. Yeah, I made up that with my persona Mary, that she fills her days by visiting and taking care of her mom and watching the news and gardening and going for walks with friends. Yeah, I made that up because it's a fictitious character that I'm gleaning a bunch of data points from, and not everybody in my data pool says they take care of their mom. So yeah, I have to make that up. What's nice is having data to start with, but having the persona creation in a group meeting is you're able to pull ideas from each other and align on and piece together who this person is. So ultimately, at the end of the activity, you have a persona. So you know how old Mary is, you know where she lives, you know who she lives with, you know what motivates her, you know how she spends her time, you know her concerns, you know when she's taking training, you know her feelings about social media and technology and her communication. You have, in the end, a rich picture with which to base your decisions off of. Became particularly important for our persona Mary that I've been speaking with, because from an accessibility perspective, it became apparent that yes, we do need to really consider things like color, contrast. We should be doing these things with any program, but having that up and added layer, realizing that our persona, Mary, over indexes in use of screen readers than our other personas became very important, as did the whole idea of ensuring we're chunking out particular tasks. So cognitively, it would help from an accessibility standpoint for our persona. These things then become not just things you have to do. Yes, we have to make sure it works with the screen reader, which should be table stakes. This becomes the added lens. Like, oh, maybe when we design this from the start, we shouldn't design an e-learning. Like, for real, this became decisions of like, we shouldn't design an e-learning. This is not the optimal experience for Mary. The screen readers for the tools we're using are not great. What is a better approach? What is the best way that Mary can actually learn this new software?
I love that how the personas can inform before you even design the training, what would make sense so that you don't waste your time, like creating an e-learning for someone who this person doesn't have an email and they don't spend time on the computer. So is there a different way to do it? Or they use a screen reader. I mean, not that you can use a screen reader for e-learning courses, but inform that it is accessible, or like how are you designing it?
Yeah, in particular for this example, we did need to roll out software training to the whole entire organization. But because we kept Mary at the forefront, would Mary take this training? Would Mary understand our jargon? No to both. Would she find this overwhelming? Yes, we changed our approach. Originally, the idea was to have it be just self-paced, e-learning to use the software. Doesn't work for Mary. So we actually created the solution. While there's a few personas, we created it for Mary's needs. Instead, we had hands-on workshops where Mary was able to, while remote, still be able to use the system and have somebody there as a coach on call so she could ask her questions to, or if needed, Mary could actually have the coach there and be doing all the things herself and just say, hey, coach, I've got a question right now. I need help right now. It's a very, very different approach than if we didn't consider Mary's needs from the start. We couldn't retrofit an e-learning to actually meet her needs. It became really dramatic from the start. Okay, we need to meet Mary's needs. Let's think completely differently in a way that provides the best learner experience.
Well, I love that, of course. I've been thinking a lot about accessibility this year as we're working on a book project and our intensive program happening in November. So it's cool to hear how learner personas could help inform inclusive design from the start. Very intentional inclusive design, that's next level maybe for some designers if they're not doing it yet, but the ultimate goal. That's really cool to hear.
Absolutely.
So, okay, let me see. I'm going to go jumping back to, we've been talking about how we use them. Did we talk? We're talking a little bit about when you use them versus not, kind of like mishaps. What else? Anything else that I'm missing here that would be helpful? Like for other, and again, I know I'm going to have folks listening who are like, we get it. We know what learner personas are, but I know that there are some folks who do not, and they are like me, and they're still making sense of it. So hopefully I've done those folks justice with my little knowledge about learner personas today.
Fantastic questions. I would say two things on mishaps. Firstly, the idea of stereotypes, and second, the idea of the best use cases. Mm-hmm. So I had alluded to the fact of there is incomplete data that becomes one of the constraints, just the reality within learning and development. We don't have the budgets of the marketing world. So we will need to infer. But beyond making assumptions like I've done, like okay, they live in Montreal, they go for walks with their friends, what can become a danger zone is creating stereotypes based on your criteria. So with our example, Mary, it could be very easy to presume that, okay, I've said she's 70 and gone down the path of thinking about stereotypes that would not accurately portray somebody, an older individual. Going down that route, very dangerous because that's not a representation of our learner.
Yeah.
Likewise with Isabel, based on her ethnic characteristics, it could be easy to go down a track thinking about her relation to data and such, but that's not grounded in the gathering stage. Like that's just a stereotype based on her race. So being very aware that you need to gather data. I've mentioned qualitative and qualitative data. Yet there will be gaps, so you will need to infer. When you are making those inferences, be aware of when you're making too much of an inference, when you're adding things that you don't have grounded in data that have an impact on your persona. So that's something to just keep in front, to be aware of. The second thing I would say in terms of use cases is learner personas are useful when you have enough training, learning solutions, problem solving, needs for a particular audience. They are not so useful if you are doing that one-time compliance course. You may not have a choice to change your training anyhow. Okay, people have to read it and click, yes, I read it at the end. Okay. And you have to use this text and this font and no images. Great. Learner persona, not useful, especially if something's one time, because you are making an investment in your own time, even if it isn't any financial investment in determining who a persona is. You are spending a lot of time and you are making some big decisions on it. So I would ensure that you have the use case that this is a population base you will be creating a series of various learning solutions for. And be aware of, at every turn, you should be asking, would Mary understand this? Would Mary understand this jargon? But there are times when you're like, nope, Mary doesn't care about this training. And it's compliance training, and I have to do it, and it has to be this size script. Okay, I know Mary's not going to like this, and maybe there's other things I could do with communications to help her out. But at least with that use case from an ongoing training population, you're at least aware that, yes, this is not going to hit the mark. Maybe you can't do anything about it, but that awareness helps inform your other decisions that overall can make the learning experience more impactful.
It made me start to think of other scenarios. Like if you're strapped for resources, you're strapped for time, you're a very small team, and maybe a very small organization. What would the argument be for learner personas there? Would there still potentially it would be worthwhile and it could help change the trajectory of your trainings, like that you would be able to use them over time? I guess what would you say to someone who's thinking like, I'm doing two jobs in one. I'm on the small team. I don't know if we really have the time, if it's really worthwhile.
Yeah, I would say it helps drive decisions later on of actually what you would even create training for. So presuming there's at least 20 people in your learner training population, then there is merit in it because a persona helps you determine, okay, with this particular segment of, let's say, the 20 people, no, I'm not going to have their needs met for this particular instance because there isn't enough risk or impact or benefit involved, but it's that awareness of it, presuming, of course, this is an ongoing group. And ideally, though, there's a larger base of a population, so 100 people that you're creating training from, realizing that maybe there's a few roles that could fit in if the organization's smaller, but it really helps streamline what you're creating training for and how you're creating it. We've used it successfully with business stakeholders and executives to have them think and get their buy-in to, okay, this systems training, given what you know about our persona, what we shared with you in the past, we're recommending this alternate approach because we don't believe it will work. And people get it because personas are much easier to convince stakeholders with than just the data alone.
That makes a good case for it. Yeah, I like that. Okay, I know we could continue talking about learner personas, so you could continue answering all of my questions. Hopefully this was a great deep dive for folks who are interested, thinking about how they could use them in their organizations. I want to switch gears so that we can talk about your learning goals before we wrap up for today. Unless you have any last closing thoughts, statements, something that you wanted to mention on. Okay, cool. So let's talk. How are you pushing yourself to get out of your comfort zone these days?
Oh, so myself, I'm pushing myself two ways. One is through an AI community of practice that I'm hosting for the purpose of getting people together to share best practices, ideas, fears, concerns, solutions about AI. So that's pushing me out and making me learn a ton, which is phenomenal. So my AI community practice. And then I'm also pushing my own learning boundaries through a podcast I have, You 2042, The Future of Work, where I've learned so many interesting facets from various thought leaders and futurists, guests on the show, about what's coming in 2 years or 19 years. It's amazing to gain that type of insights and really push my own learning.
Yeah. When you were describing it to me, I was like, God, I bet it's changed so, so much from when you started it, which was before the pandemic, right?
Yes.
To now,
Yes.
what
It's
people
so
I think
amazing.
is going to be like in 2043. Is that what it is?
2042.
2042. 2042 and you. Okay. Yes, we will definitely include that in the show notes. Oh, I'm excited to listen to it.
It's so much fun.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Danielle. I know we'll share that template you mentioned, your site, your community of practice, your podcast, anything else, your LinkedIn, share that as well.
Yes, that'd be lovely. And please feel free, anybody, to reach out with questions. I love learner personas. I've been using them for decades and really see the value from a learning and development standpoint that can really value to the whole learner experience, no matter who they are. So please, happy to have more conversations.
Yay. Well, thank you so much for bearing with all my questions and walking us through it and helping us get an idea of how we could apply learner personas. It was really fun to chat with you today.
Thank you so much.